worlds. I saw another world, another planet. I've remembered everything that went on there clearly and in detail, and at the same time in my consciousness there remains the sense that such a thing cannot be seen. Imagine, your mind and consciousness tell you that such a thing cannot be seen, but the visions and scenes remain inside you. I will try to describe them for you. I was standing on ground like earth. There was absolutely no vegetation around me. I say, standing, but whether I should put it that way is hard to say. I didn't have legs or arms, or a body, for that matter, and at the same time it seemed as though I could feel the stoniness and unevenness of the surface through the soles of my feet. Around me, as far as the eye could see, rose machines, egg-shaped and squared off, like a cube. I say, machines, because the one closest to me was rumbling lightly. Tubes of many different sizes led from the machines into the ground. Some tubes shook slightly, as if something were being sucked out of the ground through them, and some were still. There were no living beings whatsoever in the vicinity. All of a sudden, I saw the blinds separate on the side of a strange mechanism and a kind of disc floated out slowly. It resembled the ones athletes throw, only bigger. The disc was approximately 45 meters in diameter. It hovered in the air and rotated. It descended a little, then flew up and rushed over me without making any sound whatsoever. The other mechanisms standing farther away were doing the same thing, and a few more discs flew over me, one after the other, following the first. Then, again, emptiness, just the rumble and shudder of the strange mechanisms. The scene piqued my interest, but its lifelessness frightened me more. "You have nothing to fear, Vladimir." Suddenly I heard Anastasia's voice and cheered up. "Where are you, Anastasia?" I asked. "Next to you. We are invisible, Vladimir. Our feelings, sensations, intellect, and all our other invisible energies are present here right now. Here we are present without our material bodies. No one can do anything to us. The only thing you have to fear is yourself and the consequences of your own feelings." What kinds of consequences could there be? Psychological ones, like losing your mind temporarily. Oh, yes, only temporarily. For a month or two, the vision of other planets sometimes disturbs man's mind and consciousness. But don't be afraid. This does not threaten you. You will withstand it. Here, too, don't be afraid of anything. Believe me, understand me, Vladimir, right now you are here but you do not exist for them. Right now we are invisible and impenetrable. I'm not afraid. Why don't you tell me, Anastasia, what these rumbling machines all around are? What are they for? Each of these egg-shaped machines is a factory. They produce the flying saucers that interest you so much. But who services and runs these factories? No one. They were programmed from the outset to produce a specific wear. Through the tubes, which go deep down, they suck out whatever raw materials they need in the required amount. Smelting, stamping, and then assembly take place in small chambers and a fully finished product goes out. This kind of factory is much more rational than any earthly one. There is virtually no waste from its operation. There is no need to transport raw materials from distant places, no need to haul separate details to the assembly point. The entire manufacturing process occurs in one place. Stunning. If only we had something like this. But who pilots the new flying saucer? I saw them all flying in one direction. No one pilots it. It flies to the warehousing facility itself. Incredible. Just like a living being. Actually, there is nothing incredible about it, even for earthly technologies. After all, Earth also has pilotless planes and missiles. Nevertheless, people still guide them from Earth. Earth has long had missiles that are pre-programmed for a specific purpose. All you have to do is press the launch button, and the missile itself starts up and flies to a determined goal. Maybe it does. And really, why should I be so amazed at this? If you think about it, there is not a lot that can amaze you. There is significant progress here only in comparison with earthly technologies. These factories are multifunctional, Vladimir. They can produce a great many things, from foodstuffs to powerful weapons. How do they make foodstuffs? Nothing grows here. Everything is underground. When necessary, the machine sucks the requisite juices from underground through its tubes and presses them into granules. These granules contain all the substances necessary for keeping the flesh alive. What does this thing itself feed on? Who provides electricity for it? I don't see any wires. It makes its own energy, using everything around it. Just look, how smart. Smarter than man. Not at all smarter than man. It's just a machine. It obeys the program given it. It is very easy to reprogram. Do you want me to show you how it's done? Show me. Let's move a little closer to it. We were standing a meter away from the butt end of a huge mechanism the size of a 9-story building. I could hear its crackling more distinctly. Many tubes, as flexible as tentacles, extended from it and went underground and were moving around. The surface on the butt end was not entirely smooth. I saw a circle approximately a meter in diameter thickly covered with tiny, filament-like wires. Each moved individually. This is the antenna of the scanning instrument. It catches the brain's energy impulses, which are used to compile programs capable of carrying out any assignment received. If your brain models some kind of thing, the machine will have to manufacture it. Anything. Anything you can picture in detail. It's like building with your thoughts. And any automobile. Naturally. Can I try it right now? Yes. Move closer to the receiver and first force it mentally to turn all its antenna's filaments toward you. As soon as that happens, start picturing what you desire. I was standing next to the antenna filaments and, burning with curiosity, I mentally desired that all its filaments listened to me. First they turned in my direction and then all of them, trembling faintly, sent their tips toward my invisible head and fell still. Now I had to picture some kind of thing. For some reason I started picturing a Zhiguli, Model 7, the automobile I had in Novosibirsk. I tried to picture everything in detail, the windshield and hood, the bumper, the color, even the license plate. Well, in general, I spent a long time picturing it all. When I got tired of it I moved away from the antenna. The enormous machine started rumbling harder. You're going to have to wait, Anastasia explained. Now it will dismantle the incomplete product and compile a program to carry out your idea. Will I have to wait long? Not long, I don't think. We walked up to the other machines. As I examined the multicolored stones underfoot, Anastasia said, I think the product you thought up is finished. Let's go see how well it carried out your assignment. We moved toward the familiar machine and started waiting. After a little while, its blinds opened and a Zhiguli slid down a smooth ramp onto the ground. But this monster standing before me was very far from the beauty of the earthly automobile. First, it only had one door, the one on the driver's side. Instead of a back seat, there were reels of wire and pieces of rubber. I walked, or moved, around the item standing there. You couldn't call it an automobile. On the passenger side, it was missing 2 wheels. There was no front license plate or bumper. The hood apparently didn't open. It looked as if it was of a piece with the chassis. In general, this unique factory had produced not an automobile but some kind of goblin of indeterminate purpose. Some job it did, I said. It looks like an extraterrestrial enterprise. For something like that on Earth, they'd fire all the designers and engineers. Anastasia burst into laughter and then her voice informed me, of course, they would. But after all, the main designer in this case is you, Vladimir, and you see the fruit of your design. I wanted a regular modern automobile, and what did it spit out? Wanting isn't enough. You have to picture everything in the tiniest detail. Your imagination didn't even think of passenger doors. You just thought about the one door for yourself. You pictured only the wheels on your side. You were too lazy to put wheels on the other side. I don't think you even thought about an engine. No, I didn't. That means your construction doesn't have an engine inside. So why are you angry at the manufacturer, if you yourself gave him such an incomplete program? All of a sudden I saw or felt 3 flying apparatuses approach us. We should beat it, the thought flashed, but Anastasia's voice reassured me. They won't notice or sense us, Vladimir. They've received information about an interruption in the plant's operation and now they've probably come to inspect. We can calmly observe the living inhabitants of this planet. Out of the 3 small flying apparatuses came 5 extraterrestrials. They looked a lot like earthly people. Not just like them, but everything about them was like Earth people. They were well formed. No stooping, their athletic bodies held their handsome heads straight and proud. They had hair on their heads and eyebrows on their face and one had a neatly trimmed mustache. They wore thin, multicolored, tight-fitting coveralls. The extraterrestrials walked up to the automobile their factory had made, or rather, to the semblance of an earthly automobile. They stood beside it and looked at it in silence, without emotion. They're probably examining it, I thought. The youngest of the extraterrestrials standing there, a dark blonde, walked up to the car door and tried to open it. The door wouldn't. The lock must have stuck. His further actions were quite earthly, which made me like them very much. The dark blonde slapped the door in the area of the lock, gave one harder tug on the handle, and the door opened. He sat in the driver's seat, put his hands on the wheel, and began carefully examining the instruments on the dashboard. Good job, I thought. He's smart. Confirming my conclusion, I heard Anastasia's voice. This is a very prominent scientist, by their standards, Vladimir. His mind works quickly and rationally in the technical area. He also studies the life of other planets, including Earth. Even his name resembles an earthly one, Archon. But why doesn't he seem surprised that the factory produced the wrong thing? Feelings and emotions are almost entirely lacking among inhabitants of this planet. Their mind works rationally and evenly and is not subject to emotional outbursts or divergences from a set goal. The dark blonde climbed out of the car and made noises like a telegraph clicking out Morse code. An elderly extraterrestrial stepped out from the group and stood by the filament antenna where I had stood earlier. Then they all got into their flying apparatuses and disappeared. The factory that produced the automobile according to my design began to rumble again. Its tube tentacles pulled out from underground and headed in the direction of the nearest automatic factory, from which tube tentacles were also stretching. When all the tentacles connected, Anastasia said, "See, they have issued the self-destruct program." All the details of the factory that had the interruption will be melted down by the other factory and used in production. I felt a little sorry for the robot factory with which I had so unsuccessfully created an earthly automobile. But there was nothing to be done here. Vladimir, do you want to look at the daily life of this planet's inhabitants? Anastasia offered. Yes. Of course. We found ourselves above one of the big planet's cities or settlements. The view from above offered the following picture. As far as the eye could see, this entire settlement consisted of lots of cylindrical structures resembling modern skyscrapers. They were placed in many circles. At the center of each circle were lower structures reminiscent of earthly trees. Many of their radar leaves were even green. According to Anastasia, the artificial constructions collected from below ground the components of substances essential for feeding the organism, which were subsequently sent through special pipelines to the housing of each planet inhabitant. The structures in the center of the circles also supported the essential atmosphere on the planet. When Anastasia suggested spending time in one of the apartments, I asked, could we go to the apartment of that dark blonde extraterrestrial who got into my car? Yes, she replied. He is just about to come home from work right now. We found ourselves nearly at the very top of one of the cylindrical skyscrapers. There were no windows in the extraterrestrial building. The round walls were painted in squares of muted colors. At the bottom of each square was a door that lifted, like in a modern garage. From time to time, a small flying apparatus like those made by the robot factories would fly out of the aperture that opened in the lower part of the square and fly off. It turned out that, under each apartment in the tall building, there was a small garage for the apparatus. There were no elevators or doors in the building. Each apartment had a separate entrance straight from the garage, and, as became clear later, each inhabitant of this planet who had reached a certain age lived in this kind of apartment. At first, I didn't like the apartment itself very much. When we followed the dark blonde extraterrestrial into his apartment, its poverty and bareness amazed me. The room of about 30 square meters was completely empty. Not only did it not have any windows or partitions, it didn't have any furniture either. The smooth, light-colored walls did not have a single shelf or picture for decoration. Did he just get this apartment? I asked Anastasia. Arkan has been living here for 20 years. His apartment has everything he needs for rest, entertainment, and work. Everything essential is built into the walls. You're about to see for yourself. Indeed, as soon as Arkan walked up from his sub-apartment garage, the room's ceiling and walls began to glow softly. Arkan turned to face the wall next to the entrance, placed his palm on the surface, and made a sound. A square in the wall lit up. Anastasia provided a running commentary of events in the apartment. Right now, the computer is identifying the apartment's owner based on the lines in his hand and the pattern of his eye. Now it will greet him and tell him how long he has been absent and of the need to audit his physical condition. You see, Vladimir, Arkan has put his other hand on the console and taken a deep breath so that the computer can check his health. The audit is over and a report has appeared on the screen about what nutritive mixture he needs to take. The computer is also asking what Arkan intends to do for the next 3 hours. The computer needs to know this in order to prepare the appropriate mixture. Now Arkan is asking for a mixture that can maximally activate his intellectual activities for the next 3 hours, and after that he intends to go to sleep. The computer does not recommend that he engage in active intellectual activity for 3 hours and suggests that he take a compound calculated to support active work for 2 hours and 16 minutes. Arkan has agreed with the computer's recommendation. A small niche has opened in the wall where Arkan has taken a flexible tube by the handle and brought its tip to his mouth. He's drunk and eaten from the tube and walked over to the opposite wall. The niche with the tube has closed, the screen square has gone out, and the wall where the extraterrestrial was just standing is once again smooth and a single color. I thought, with that kind of technology there's no more need of a kitchen and all its equipment, dishes, furniture, and even cleanup. Nor is there any need for a wife who cooks well. You don't have to go to the store. The computer audits your health at the same time it prepares the food you need and gives out all kinds of recommendations. I wonder how much a computer like that would cost if it were manufactured on Earth. At this, Anastasia's voice informed me, as for costs, it is cheaper to equip each apartment with this kind of setup than to load up a kitchen with furniture and all the food preparation equipment. They are much more rational than Earthlings in everything. But there is something much more rational on Earth than what they have. I paid no attention to Anastasia's last sentence. I was interested in Arkan's next actions. He continued to give voice commands, and the following events took place in the room. An armchair suddenly started to inflate from part of the wall. Beside the armchair, another small niche opened, out of which came a little table with a translucent, sealed vessel that looked like a laboratory beaker. On the opposite wall, a large screen about 1.5 meters or 2 on the diagonal lit up. Sitting in an armchair on the screen was a beautiful woman in a tight-fitting coverall. The woman was holding a vessel like the one on the table next to Arkan. The woman appeared in 3D, much better than on our televisions. She seemed to be sitting right in the room, not on the screen. As Anastasia explained, Arkan and the woman sitting opposite him had made a child. The inhabitants of this planet do not have emotions sufficiently strong to engage in sexual relations, like people on Earth. Outwardly, their bodies are no different from ours, but the lack of emotion keeps them from producing offspring the way we do on Earth. The test tubes you see now have their cells and hormones in them. The man and woman imagine what kind of future child they would like to have, his appearance. They mentally bestow upon him the information they have and discuss his future activities. This process lasts about 3 years in Earth time. As soon as they decide the process of shaping their child is complete, the contents of the 2 vessels are combined in a special laboratory, they produce a child, and he is raised in a special nursery and school until adulthood. They present the new adult member of the community with an apartment and include him in one of the working groups. Arkan looked at the woman on the screen and then at the small sealed vessel of liquid in front of him. Suddenly, the built-in screen went out, but the extraterrestrial remained sitting in his chair, looking steadily at the small vessel on the table in front of him with a particle of his future child. Little red squares began to flash on the opposite wall. The extraterrestrial turned sideways to the wall, blocked the blinking light with the palm of his hand, and leaned his head closer to his vessel. Immediately, new squares and triangles of light began flashing in alarm from the ceiling. The time the computer allocated for wakefulness for Arkan has run out, and now the computer is insisting on the need for sleep, Anastasia explained. But the extraterrestrial leaned his head even closer to his vessel and placed his palms on it. The lights coming from the ceiling and wall stopped blinking. The room began to fill with something like a steam or gas. Anastasia's voice commented, "Now the computer will put Arkan to sleep with sleeping gas." The extraterrestrial's head slowly began to lean toward the table and soon after lay down on it and his eyes shut. The armchair began moving away from the wall and turned into a bed. Then the chair bed rocked from side to side, and the body of the already sleeping extraterrestrial fell on his comfortable bed. Arkan slept holding his small vessel in his hand, pressed to his chest. I could tell you a lot more about the technical perfections of the unusual apartment and the large planet in general. According to Anastasia, its inhabitants are not afraid of any invasion from without. Furthermore, their technology can destroy life on any planet in the universe, except Earth. Why? I asked. You mean our missiles and weapons can deflect their attacks? Anastasia replied, they aren't afraid of earthly missiles, Vladimir. The community on this planet has long since learned everything about secondary explosion expansion. They also know about compression explosion. What is compression explosion? On Earth, we know how two or more substances combine in an instantaneous reaction and expand to produce an explosion. But there is another kind of reaction from the contact of two substances. A gaseous substance of a cubic kilometer or more can in a single instant compress to the size of a pea and become a super solid material. Imagine a shell or missile exploding in this kind of a cloud, but simultaneously another forces counters the expansion explosion and a compression explosion occurs simultaneously. All you hear then is a clap, and everything in that cloud turns into a pea-sized stone. Earthly missiles cannot overcome a curtain of gaseous clouds. In the history of the Earth, there have been 2 attacks from the direction. Now they are readying a third. They believe a propitious moment has arrived again. So there is no way to oppose them if there are no weapons on Earth more powerful than what they have. Man does have a weapon. It is called human thought. Even I alone could turn about half their weapons to dust and scatter the dust through the universe. If I had helpers, together we could eliminate all the weaponry. Unfortunately, most people and nearly all the governments of Earth will perceive their coming as something good. How could everyone perceive their invasion and seizure as something good? You're just about to see. Here, look at the center, which is preparing a landing force to conquer the Earth. Seizure center. Naturally, I expected to see interplanetary supertechnology capable of subduing an entire planet. But what appeared before my eyes? I don't think American and other military specialists would ever guess the weapons that could so easily subdue the territories they supposedly defend. Now you, dear readers, before reading further, try to imagine the weaponry of extraterrestrials preparing to seize Earth. Then you will see what it looks like in fact. Outwardly it looks like this. A huge square building. On each of the building's 4 sides there are full-size replicas of the interiors of our earthly parliaments, State Duma, and office of our president in the Kremlin. On the opposite side of the hall are the interiors of the American Parliament and the President's White House office. On the other 2 sides of the hall are the interiors of the state organs of, apparently, Asian countries. Our earthly deputies, congressmen, and presidents sit in the parliamentary chairs. At first, I examined the replicas of our Russian deputies. They were an exact copy of those familiar faces I have had occasion to see on television. However, they sat without moving, like mummies. It's hard to say what they were made of. They might have been puppets, holograms, or robots, or maybe something else. In the middle of the huge hall, about 50 extraterrestrials sat in armchairs placed on a dais. They were not wearing the usual coveralls but our earthly suits, and they were listening to the person speaking before them. The speaker was probably their main instructor or some other sort of superior. Anastasia explained that I was watching one of their landing parties, now taking another class to prepare them to interact with earthly governments. They studied the most widespread languages on Earth and people's behavior in different situations. They were preparing especially carefully for contact with earthly governments and legislative bodies, through which they hoped to influence the Earth's entire population. Conversational speech came easily to them, but due to their lack of certain feelings capable of calling forth visible emotions, it was hard for them to learn the gestures and facial expressions of earthly people. Furthermore, their logical habits of thought just couldn't grasp the logic in the system of state governance on Earth. Despite bringing in the best minds and most advanced technology of their civilization, they simply could not guess, for example, the following secret: why, despite the computer technology the Earth already had, did the many special scientific institutions not present state legislative bodies with information about the consequences of the decisions they took? These aliens were convinced that given a central analytic center, for which the Earth already had everything it needed, social phenomena could be modeled almost exactly, depending on the sum total of decisions taken. However, each member of an earthly government, each legislator, was supposed to act independently and decide on his own. Without sufficient information, each member of government had to carry out the functions of a powerful analytical center and in so doing calculate the consequences of the behavior of his colleagues, enemies, and friends. Another very mysterious issue not solved by the extraterrestrials was why earthly people did not decide on the goal they had to reach. They strove towards something, but what exactly that was kept a deep dark secret. Nevertheless, assuming present-day requirements of earthly communities of people, the extraterrestrials were preparing a plan for seizing the Earth's continents. They would start implementing their plan by means of proposals to Earthlings made through the governments of various countries. Their proposals would be accepted with delight. When I asked Anastasia why she was so certain about the decisions of earthly governments, this answer followed. That is what their analysis center has calculated. The center's conclusion is correct. The present-day level of awareness of most Earthlings will consider what the extraterrestrials propose to be the highest manifestation of the humanity of the cosmic intellect. And what are these proposals? They are monstrous, Vladimir. I don't like talking about them. At least tell me the main parts. I would like to know what these monstrous proposals are that will be received with such joy on Earth, where, after all, we both live. The extraterrestrials plan to land a small force first consisting of 3 flying apparatuses, in the territory of Russia. They will inform the military that surrounds them of the desire to meet with governmental circles with regard to cooperation. They will introduce themselves to the military as representatives of the supreme universal intellect and will demonstrate the superiority of their technology to them. After meetings in military, scientific, and governmental circles, after about 14 days, they will be asked to make their proposals specific but first to undergo an examination to establish the safety of contact with them. The space aliens will agree to examination and will present their proposals in written form and on videocassettes. The text will be set out in a form very similar to official documents today and will be distinguished by maximum simplicity. The content of the text will be approximately as follows. We are representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization that has achieved a higher technological development than the other rational inhabitants of the galaxies, and we consider the people of Earth our brothers in intellect. We are prepared to share our knowledge in various areas of science and social development with the earthly communities and to offer our technologies. We ask you to consider our proposals and choose the most acceptable of them for improving the life of every member of society. Then will follow many specific proposals, the essence of which will boil down to the following. The space aliens will offer their technologies to provide all of the country's inhabitants with nutritional mixtures and swift construction of housing for each person who has reached adulthood. The same kind of buildings you have already seen, only with fewer functions. As an example, they would supply the country with their mini factories. They would combine the extraterrestrial factories with existing earthly ones, but in 5 years all the earthly technologies will have been used and replaced by technically more rational ones. Everyone wanting to work would be given a job. Not only that, absolutely every inhabitant of Earth would have to apply the necessary minimum of working hours to maintain the equipment. The country that reached an agreement with the space aliens would be fully protected from military invasion by other countries. The society with the new social structure and technically equipped daily life would have no crime. In your apartment, you would be given everything necessary. The apartment would react only to commands issued by your voice with the timbre characteristic of it alone. Daily, before consumption of food, your apartment's computer would determine your physical condition based on your eyeball and the composition of the air you breathed and other parameters and prescribe the appropriate composition of your nutritive mixture. Each computer installed in an individual apartment would be linked to the main one. In this way, the location of each person would be known, as would his physical and psychological condition. Any crime could be easily solved using a special program on the main computer, and there would be no social base for breeding crime. In exchange, the aliens intended to ask the government for the opportunity to settle representatives of their civilization in lightly populated regions, forests mainly, the right to exchange individual gardens for the new highly advanced apartments, and lifelong security for everyone wishing to exchange their piece of land. The government would agree, since they would retain full power, or so they would think. Several religions would start to preach that the space aliens were God's emissaries since they did not reject a single one of the religions that existed on Earth. Religious leaders who did not believe in the space aliens' divine perfection would not be able to counter them, due to their acceptance by most of the country that had reached the agreement. Other countries would want to try to cooperate with the aliens. 9 years after their appearance on Earth on all continents and in all countries, the new way of life would quickly take root, and more new developments in technology and social structure would be propagandized through all the information channels. The majority of the population would praise the representatives of the cosmic intellect as their more perfect brothers in intellect, like gods. With good reason, I commented. There is nothing bad in there not being wars or crime on Earth. An apartment, food, and work for each person. Vladimir, have you really not understood that by accepting the extraterrestrials' conditions, humanity would be giving up its own non-material, divine self? It would be killing itself. All that would remain would be material bodies. Each person would come to resemble a biorobot more and more, Vladimir. All earthly children would be born biorobots. But why? All people would be compelled to serve daily the mechanisms that outwardly serve them. All humanity would fall into the trap and give up their freedom and their children for the perfection of artificial technology. Intuitively, many earthlings would immediately sense their mistake and then they would start committing suicide. Strange. What would they be lacking? Freedom, creativity, and the sensations that only creation aided by the divine can offer. And what if the parliaments and governments of Earth don't accede to agreements with the extraterrestrials? What will happen then? Will they start destroying humanity? Then the extraterrestrial minds will start searching for other paths to lure everybody into their trap. It makes no sense for them to destroy humanity. After all, the goal is to know the interconnection among all earthly creations and by what power their reproduction is created. Nothing of the kind can be done without man. Man himself is the chief link in the chain. What will happen then? Will they start destroying humanity? Then the extraterrestrial minds will start searching for other paths to lure everybody into their trap. It makes no sense for them to destroy humanity. After all, the goal is to know the interconnection among all earthly creations and by what power their reproduction is created. Nothing of the kind can be done without man. Man himself is the chief link in the chain of the harmony of earthly creation. Even the sun's rays are a part of the energies and feelings that many people reproduce. Given today's consciousness, the aliens are not afraid of the people of Earth, and even now many Earthlings are trying to help them. How can that be? Who among us helps them? Does this mean there are traitors among people? They're working for them. Yes, they are, but those people are not traitors. Their complicity is acquired without their will, not maliciously, not intentionally. The main reason is their lack of faith in themselves and in the perfection of God's creations. What kind of interconnection is here? A simple one. When a person allows the thought that he is not a perfect creation, when he suddenly begins to imagine that beings on other planets have a more powerful intellect, he himself feeds them with his thought. Man himself dims his divine power and does not direct power to the divine creations. They have learned to collect the energy produced by human thoughts and feelings into a single complex, and they are proud of this. Look, there is a vessel before the group of extraterrestrials, and in it a liquid is glowing, first turning into a gas, then solidifying. They have no stronger weapon than what is contained in that small vessel. Later, they will divide all of its contents into many small, flat vessels. One of its walls will be a special reflector. They will hang a device like this on their chest. All those sitting in front of you already have them. When this kind of device directs its ray at a human being, it can give rise in the human being to fear, worship, or admiration. It can paralyze the human will, consciousness, and body. The thoughts of many people are contained in that ray. People's thoughts that there is someone more powerful than man in the universe, than man, God's creation. And their thoughts can be used to counter those very same people. So we ourselves add to their power when we extol them as more intelligent than ourselves. Yes, that's right. More intelligent than ourselves, which means more intelligent than God. What does God have to do with this? We are all His creations. When we believe that there are worlds more perfect in the galaxies, we are implying that we are imperfect, that God's creations are imperfect. That's just great. Has a lot of this kind of energy accumulated in the extraterrestrial world? There is enough in the vessel before you to subdue approximately 3/4 of all earthly minds and to master human feelings. They believe that this is enough and then some. Then worship of the civilization the aliens created on Earth will begin, and the aliens' might will increase. Does this mean that nothing can be done? It can, if a risk is taken that they are not expecting. After all, the full set of human feelings, even that of one person, is always more powerful. Thought can be accelerated to incredible rates in those who do not possess feelings, and all the energy gathered in the vessel can be neutralized by the energy of another thought that is brighter, more confident, and more perfect. And you, Anastasia, could you neutralize all the energy contained in the vessel? I could try, but I would need to gather my whole body here for that. What for? My set of feelings will be incomplete without my body. Matter is one of the planes of human existence. With it, man is more powerful than the universal essences. So gather it to break the vessel. I'm going to try to do something now without breaking it. And all of a sudden I saw Anastasia before me in the flesh. Everything on her was as it had been in the forest, the blouse, the skirt. Her bare feet were standing on the floor, and suddenly she started walking unhurriedly toward those sitting before the vessel with the glowing liquid. They saw her. The unfeeling extraterrestrials' faces did not express any emotions. But they only sat without stirring for one instant. A second later everyone had stirred. All of a sudden, as if on someone's command, they stood up, and each picked up the medallion hanging on his chest. All the medallions burst out in rays. All the rays were aimed toward Anastasia walking toward them. She stopped, swayed, and suddenly took a small step back, stopped again, smiled, tapped her bare foot, and slowly, confidently, started forward again. The rays coming from the extraterrestrials' medallions became brighter and brighter, merging into one aimed at Anastasia. It seemed that they would incinerate all her clothing in an instant. But Anastasia kept walking forward. She suddenly held her hands out in front and extinguished several rays, deflecting them with her palms, and then the rest began to go out. The extraterrestrials stood as before, without stirring. Anastasia walked up to the vessel, placed her palms on its sides, stroked the vessel, and whispered something to it. The liquid in the vessel suddenly started to seethe. Then its light began to go out little by little, and soon after, the liquid in the vessel had become slightly blue. Like ordinary water on Earth. Anastasia walked up to the machine by the wall that looked like an earthly refrigerator. She placed her palm on it, whispered something, and the machine spat colored square tablets out into the lifted hem of her blouse. Anastasia walked up to the extraterrestrials, who was still standing there mute, and held out a tablet from the machine to the one on the end. The extraterrestrial stirred and was about to reach for it but immediately fell still, then began to stare at the person standing in front of them all, probably their leader. Anastasia stood like that in front of him with her hand held out for about half a minute. Then she walked right up to the leader and held out a tablet to him. After a pause, the leader took the tablet and put it in his mouth. Anastasia went around to everyone present, and each now calmly took the tablets and chewed or swallowed them. Then she walked away from them toward me, stopped halfway, turned toward the group of sitting extraterrestrials, and waved to them. A few extraterrestrials rose from their seats and waved to her in reply. When she came even with me, Anastasia said in a weary voice, "We need to return. They have now taken tablets that accelerate thought. Let them try to make sense of what has happened here." And it was all over. I lay on the forest grass as before, as if I had awakened from a deep sleep. It seemed as if very little time had passed, but my body felt rested, like after a deep, healthy sleep. But my head, everything seemed to be seething inside, as if my thoughts were flowing in different directions at once. The pictures I had seen on the other planet, everything remained wholly inside me. What was that? A dream? Hypnosis? Or all that put together? I couldn't understand. It was impossible to believe in the reality of seeing a planet other than Earth, and I asked Anastasia sitting next to me, what was that? A dream? Hypnosis? I remembered everything, and now there was a kind of chaos in my mind. She replied, "Vladimir, decide for yourself, as you like, by what power the vision of the other planet appeared before you. Since the question makes you uneasy, agree to say you were dreaming. All that doesn't matter. What does matter is the essence, the conclusions and feelings from the vision. Think about them, and I will go away for a little while." Yes, go away, and I will think about it myself. I began thinking about what I had seen when I was left alone. Of course, I decided I had dreamed some kind of hypnotic dream. After taking a few steps, Anastasia suddenly turned around, walked up to me again, and took something out of her blouse pocket and held her open palm out to me. In her palm lay the strange tablet I had seen on the other planet. Take it, Vladimir. You can swallow it without fear. They make it from earthly herbs on the planet where we were. It will help accelerate your thinking for about 15 minutes, so you can make sense of what you've experienced more quickly. I took the small tablet from her outstretched palm, and when Anastasia left, I ate it. Bring back your homeland.